What if the experiences we think are uniquely ours, like uncertainty or threats to our identity, discomfort, fear, are actually part of this universal human experience we all share? Hello, and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for leaders and people curious about creating a more fulfilling work life. I'm your host, Susan Ní Chríodáin, and I help people in leadership make sense of themselves and their work life, especially in times of uncertainty, transition, and difficulty. I'm also the author of the award-winning book, Leading Beyond the Numbers. And I love real conversations, the ones that invite you to truly listen, that create space for reflection, to be heard and to feel understood. Together with leaders and fellow explorers, we shine a light on what shapes our work lives, both from the outside and the inside. Join us for stories, insights and perspectives that keep humanity at the heart of work. Well, today I am delighted to welcome Rachel Morris to Life Beyond the Numbers. Rachel, you're so welcome.
Oh, I'm really, really pleased to be talking to you, Susan. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
So have I. And Rachel and I met because we both won highly commended
Hey,
books
hey.
at the Business Book Awards. And we've both been published by the same publishing house, Practical Inspiration Publishing. But well, of course, like anything, once we got talking, we had all of this other stuff in
Mhm,
common because our books, while the theme may be similar, the concept, it comes at it from a completely different angle. And we're not
mhm.
just going to talk about books today. I would like to kick off with the book because I think it will really take us in places, Rachel. And Rachel's book is called Working Mother. And I'm not a parent. I think most people listening will probably know that, but just in case, I'm not a parent. And I read this book, and I suppose what I got from it is at the heart of it for me, it was about transitions
Mm.
and people navigating that space between either making a decision and taking action or getting a promotion. I mean, there were so many avenues it could take in a workplace. And now I don't want to take away from it being about mothers either. But what sparked you in the first instance to write this book? Maybe we'll start there, Rachel.
Well, I think what sparked me, Susan, was I found myself with some information based on some practice research that we've been doing for a long time. And I thought, I'm holding something that could be useful for somebody else. So it felt genuinely like there was a moral responsibility for me to offer it out there in case it was useful for people. And I think it's really interesting, although this was placed because it had been parental transition research we'd been doing, and it was based very specifically on the most vulnerable audience, which is the working mother, as far as all statistics are concerned. The principles in the book are universal because they're about the human experience. And for me, the human experience is a universal one. And the book aims to address core aspects of something that we all experience. So, fear, learning, boundaries, identity, all those different principles. So, I know many of the things that I ended up writing about for this particular audience are the same principles that we'll use with C-suite execs in boardrooms. There's no same principles that I'll use with my own family and friends, and people will use with me. So, this universal human experience, I think, is really, really important.
It is, and that's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Because let's say I'm a leader in an organization and I'm not a parent.
Mm.
I automatically almost self-select out, thinking
Yeah.
I'm not going to understand what this person's going through, or I'm not willing to have that conversation.
Mm.
That's nonsense.
Total. Yeah. 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 And isn't it interesting how the work environment can put people through into almost a process kind of mentality and take away that human element, which is actually, I know how to talk to somebody when they're scared, or I know how to talk to somebody who feels like a massive change is happening and they're not sure about how they're going to navigate it. And when we can trust our own human experience and we can trust our skills, then actually the conversation is very natural. And more often than not in workplaces, I'm sure you experience this too, Susan, in your interactions. But if we can take the job titles away, if we can take the process away and say that classic, if this was a friend in this situation, what would you do? And therefore, how does that translate? Most people have got the skills, they've got the empathy, they've got the experiences, they know what to do in these, what are quite significant situations.
Yeah, and I guess as well, then it's not about giving the right advice or saying the right thing. It's actually just about meeting the human in
Mm,
front of you
mm,
because I'm not a parent, so I don't know what it's like to go through so much of what parents go through. But yet I could really relate to most of what you wrote in the book. And it's such an interesting dilemma, I think, that we
mm,
hold.
mm. Do you know, and it's even listening to you there, Susan, you think actually, and all first-time parents will say they don't know what it's going to be like to be a parent either, and so that learning on the job, that working it out is definitely a shared experience. I used some of the principles that sit in the book about handing over, so how a person hands over, for a chief exec who was going on a sabbatical, an 8 week overdue sabbatical. And I used exactly the same principles with him because it's like for anyone taking time out, the experience is going to be the same. How's it all going to cope without me? Is it going to be safe? Is it going to be okay? What if it falls apart? What if it doesn't fall apart? How do I feel coming back? They're all the same questions that people are asking themselves, just in a slightly different context.
I think the thing that stuck with me most reading the book, not maybe the thing that I hadn't ever considered myself, and I look back at the people I worked with that came back from maternity leave, because you talk a lot about maternity leave and people returning to the workplace,
Yeah.
was to actually onboard people
Mm,
again. I thought that was
mm.
so crucial, actually, because even if you're out 2 days,
It
you're
changes.
going to miss stuff. And when you're out for 8 or 9 months, the people that are still there can't even remember what was going on when you left.
Yeah.
You can, and you've missed everything in between. And what it reminded me of a little bit was I'm Irish and I live overseas and have done for like years and years and years and years now. And every time I go home, people just assume I know
Yes.
everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, from the local shopkeeper to my friends, because you don't know what you've missed out on.
It's interesting. People talk about everything's constantly changing, but actually it truly is. You know, as you say, if you're away from somewhere for a week or two, or and certainly in an organizational perspective, anyone coming back from any leave, whether it is sick leave, whether it is sabbatical, whether it's parental leave, any of those types of situations can come back in. Their team may have changed, the strategy may have changed, where they sit may have changed. It's like this sense of a person coming back to something that has remained static in any sense that the person has remained static too. My client who went on his sabbatical, he came back and he had had a whole heap of life informing experiences by the time he came back, having finally spent 8 weeks with his family. And actually, he is not the same leader coming back. He looks the same, he may sound the same, but so much has changed. And I think if we can acknowledge this continual movement that we have in ourselves and around ourselves, that actually everything is transitioning all the time, then actually we are much better equipped to be sensitive with how we enter situations ourselves and how we help other people who might need some support.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done
Yeah,
because
for sure.
we don't notice most of the time. I think that's what it comes back to, isn't it? To some extent, Rachel, is life just keeps going, right?
Yeah,
It is that, if you want to call it the hamster wheel, that, it
yeah,
is just constantly moving. And it's only when you step out or stop or question
yeah,
that you notice it doesn't have to be like this.
yes,
Or,
yeah,
yeah, and this epidemic, because it is some sort of epidemic of busyness that we
yeah.
live in, doesn't help.
No. no. I was talking to a lady this morning, and she lives in France, and we were talking this morning actually about organizational cultures, and we were talking about our experiences of busyness and the reward that can be attached to busyness, that actually being overwhelmed can actually be considered a good thing. People talk about giving more than 100%, which as a numbers lady, you will know is just such an obscure concept. Anyway, but this, I think it's very interesting that we can reward busyness. And one of my own supervisors said to me very, very early on, Rachel, we are called human beings, not human doings. And there's a very, very, very good reason for that. And you think learning to be, and certainly learning to be in a phase of transition when it can be really, really uncomfortable, is an incredibly hard thing for most of us to do. Incredibly hard. And I think it requires patience with ourself. It requires self-awareness. It requires sitting with that icky bit that feels really, really, really uncomfortable. We reward people being in control. We reward people being plans. We reward. So, when it feels very ambiguous for a person when they're experiencing change either within themselves or around them, it's not the norm, is it? It's not the thing that people have adapted to. We've adapted to. So how do I get a sense of control within that? And that's really, I think it's a real dilemma for people.
It is. I suppose my philosophy or outlook is that we're actually in transition from birth to death.
Yes.
That life is one
Yeah.
big transition. And of course, there are several inside in that.
Yeah.
And yet we always look for the results. So I don't know because I haven't been pregnant, but I'm guessing that when some women get pregnant, that all they want is to have the baby and not go through that part
Oh
almost.
God, yeah.
And then the kid to be
For
grown
sure.
up. And then, it's
Yeah.
like we want the result. And
Yeah.
that's what you say about the uncomfortableness. The reason we know we care about things often is because it's uncomfortable.
Mm.
Because if
Mm.
everything is just going day by day,
Yeah.
where's the difference in life? Where's the this is meaningful to me or this is helping me to grow? There's
Mm.
nothing, is there then?
No, no. And I think that's very interesting, Susan, about maybe that uncomfortableness shows we care. I haven't particularly thought about it that way. And I think that's really interesting. I think the sense of uncomfortableness being such an unfamiliar space for many, lots of people talk about vulnerability. They're big words that are talked about, but actually that sense of sitting with the unknown, which is just a huge part of so many life transitions, whether we're talking entry into parenthood, whether we're talking taking on a new role, entering a new business, whether we're talking dealing with bereavement, whatever those changes, those significant changes might be, that ability to stay and stop and be with the unknown. In transitional principles, there's often like a neutral zone that's talked about in the middle. And it's this piece of when what we've known is no longer, but what we are about to have hasn't yet come. And there's like this funny bit in between. And it can be called a no man's land. It's often described as being very, very disorientating.
That's
Is
words I'm writing down.
And none of us like feeling disorientated. It's a really, really uncomfortable feeling. And it can last. People who are listening, if they've been through significant life transitions, they will know that that disorientating nowhere can last for significant periods of time. And
It
that's deeply uncomfortable.
it is deeply uncomfortable, and I think that we, as a society,
Hmm.
and so let's broaden it out. As a society, we're uncomfortable or unfamiliar, perhaps, with distinguishing between what's uncomfortable and what feels unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we get caught thinking, I have to solve this because I'm
Mm,
unsafe here, when
mm,
actually being uncomfortable is about just going with it and allowing it because we don't know what's going to happen anyway. We never do. Even if you're told as a when you're pregnant that you're going to have a girl, you may still have a boy.
wow.
And I know people that that's happened to.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's no certainty, and human beings look for certainty. Hey, we definitely do. We definitely do. And maybe there's something in this as well, Susan, about supporting anyone who we can influence in our lives. So whether that's parents bringing up children, whether that's leaders and line managers, but actually us helping those around us, whether we're mentoring people, helping people around us actually to sit with that uncomfortable. I know as a coach, there's times when you can be team coaching really super experienced people who can use all the buzzwords about avoiding burnout and being vulnerable and all those difficult things, but actually the wrestle that can happen with helping them to see that letting go and actually just being is all that is needed at that particular moment in time. Some people look at you like you've grown two heads, so maybe we've got a responsibility actually to help people learn that sooner rather than later.
Well, we do. But
Yeah.
where does it start? I think a lot of where we are, we're in chicken and egg territory often with
Mm,
things that ideally the education system would help people understand this. And I can see there's a lot more coming in about emotional regulation and helping
lots.
people to cope with being human, because that's what
Yeah,
it comes
yeah,
back
yeah,
to, is
yeah.
human beings being human. But a lot of what you write about in the book, and a lot of, I think, what we're talking about here is tied to emotions,
Mm,
fear, guilt, overwhelm, loss of identity, and people either trying to avoid
yeah,
that
yeah,
or override it, shut it
yeah,
down.
yeah.
What happens when we have those approaches?
Yeah, it gets worse for sure. Gets worse for sure. Anyone who has experienced grief will know that actually you can't bypass it. And the rule of thumb is that actually you have to move through it. And that is really difficult, really, really, really difficult. And with any life transition, whether it is a person leaving their role because of redundancy or settlement or burnout or any of those kind of things, that the emotions that surround it are super heavy and often very, very acute. You talk about guilt. I think shame can often be a really, really big one. And fear always plays its part, doesn't it? Good old fear popping up there always. And what we know about these emotions is they kind of thrive in the dark. So stick them in a corner, shove them in a dark cupboard, and they're gonna love it. They're gonna grow and they're gonna multiply and they're gonna get bigger and bigger. If we shine a light on those emotions, however uncomfortable we think that is going to be, we know that they start to change their form and they can start to alter. And so as with all life transitions and significant life transitions, particularly if the change has triggered a transition that we didn't want, so a sudden death from somebody or being settled out of a business and we didn't actually want to leave. So we've got a huge amount of emotions going on there. The only way is to face those emotions and work with them and address them. I think my maybe hopeful word of support though is that actually people don't have to do it by themselves and actually people mustn't do it by themselves because there are beautiful supported ways of moving through those processes. It's still hard work, it still takes time.
And that word hard, I think, is one of the words I hear most in coaching sessions.
Yeah.
When things really hit an
Mm,
emotion rather than a nerve, I'd rather say,
mm,
when things hit something that is
yeah.
core to somebody's either a belief system or identity or the transition they're in, and they're
Mm,
seen, the feedback I'll often get from clients is, this is really hard.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
finding this so hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating because that's what keeps it quiet, I think, in a way,
Mm,
Rachel, because
mm,
you're never going to go into a meeting and allow those feelings to come up because you won't know how to deal with them.
mm.
And then once we get practice at pushing that down, when you do let it up, you don't know what's going to come
Yeah, it
out.
gets scarier because it's been hidden in that cupboard, getting bigger and
Multiplying.
more furious. And I think there's also something here, Susan, about language. So if we think about emotions and the range of emotions there are, actually we're very illiterate, most of us, when it comes to our emotions. So we will say happy, sad, angry, scared. We use a very basic level of language. And I feel really, really strongly that actually there's something about helping people. I apply this to myself as well, to be learning the right words. So that sense of that feeling, that somatic feeling I have, but actually how would I label it? How do I articulate that? What does it mean? Because there's a big difference between fear and despair. there's a huge difference between contentment and joy. We might call them both happy, but they're very, very different, aren't they? They're really, really different emotions. And I frequently will work with clients on kind of expanding that emotional language. My children, interestingly, talking about the education system, my children and they're in state school education and being maybe year one, so they were probably about 6 at the time, they would come home and they would talk about their guard dog, which was their name for their amygdala. They would talk about their watchtower, which was their name for their prefrontal cortex. They had these little glitter bottles that they would shake to explain that they were feeling a little bit funny at that moment in time, and then they'd watch it settle so that you could have the conversation about, see, it passes, it all passes. They were coming home from school with that. And we used to put on the fridge all these emotion words. And so when they were going, I'm really angry, we'd go, okay, let's just go check its anger. Let's just have a little look at all these different words that it could be, because most of us weren't shown that. Certainly when I was brought up in the 70s, it wasn't, hello, what? You didn't talk about things in that way. So I am very hopeful that actually over time, as generations pass, some of this understanding our emotions, understanding how they work and being able to articulate that, I think it will start to change and will start to develop.
Absolutely, my hope as well. And when I was writing my book, because the subtitle is How Accounting for Emotions Tips the Balance at Work. And Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist and psychologist, has written How Emotions Are Made, this book, and it's amazing. And her premise, I guess, at the end is emotional granularity, literacy, learning more
Mm,
emotion words is the answer to well-being.
yeah.
Because actually, once you can put a word to it or label it, you can begin to
Mm,
understand it. And
mm,
another person whose work I really admire is Dr. Mark Brackett, who has a tool called Ruler. And again, it's about understanding, regulating, and so on your emotions. And
mm,
I think what I find fascinating when we talk about emotions, Rachel, and excuse me, I really noticed this during the coverage of the Olympics. It's that we tend to associate emotions with negativity.
mm.
So when somebody says they're very emotional, it's never like that they're bursting with joy. It's always that they're fearful or nervous or something like that. And I always say, like, if it's if you're feeling emotional, could you expand on that? Because it's like I
Mm.
feel like food, but what kind of food do you want to eat?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
really a good enough
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
description. So, in a workplace or
Mm,
as an individual who's
mm,
navigating the workplace, how
mm,
do you become more familiar and less on the back foot of your emotions and
mm.
learn to use them all?
So I feel that most of us, and again, I put myself in this, we've got to put in the hard yards. We've got to put in the work. And I work with a therapist, I work with 2 supervisors, I have a great set of peers, I've got several mentors, and they challenge me to think, Rachel, what's happening with you right now? How would you describe what's happening? I've spent decades, Susan, learning about, oh, when that bit happens in that part of my body, that's because I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Or what am I feeling anxious about? How do I tell people that that's how I'm feeling at that particular moment in time in a way that feels safe or appropriate for the context and for the environment? Or maybe sometimes I don't. Maybe sometimes I say, I know you will know that I'm a really pro-choice with behavior, but actually sometimes I may say, I notice I'm feeling it, but actually I choose not to share that. And that's okay too, because it isn't the right environment or I don't feel supported enough. So I feel we have to put in the hard yards. It's like a whole stream of activity, a whole nother work project is that piece about who am I? What makes me who I am? How do I know certain things about myself and how do I start to articulate it to other people? And personally, I feel that that's a lifelong quest. I am better now than I was 10 years ago. I hope in 10 years I'll be better again and I'll understand more. And that's probably because I'll have had some quite strong transitions in that period of time and the School of Hard Knocks, and I will have been forced to confront some things that actually I might also want to hide or I might also want to ignore. but that is life, isn't it? And isn't that's what living and walking this path is?
Absolutely. So why do we want to keep it out of the workplace, Rachel? Why is there
Oh,
such an
because we're so
emphasis on not bring,
scared.
yeah.
Because everybody's so scared. And you know, I, I believe if we could accept that we're messy, human beings are messy, hey? We're not. And I'm not just talking about my hair. I can't get it neat. It's like we are messy and we want to keep it out of the workplace because the workplace doesn't like messiness, does it? We like it neat. We like it neat and tidy and in a process and what have you. I think the irony is the messiness beneath the process is far more complicated if we do it that way. So I don't think we've got the courage more often than not in the workplace to allow it to be
Ooh,
explored.
that what a great word, courage. And I think the messiness is showing up in absenteeism, in disengagement, in all of these things, conflict. I mean, there are endless numbers of unhappiness
Totally.
at work. And unhappiness is such a catch-all phrase anyway. But the messiness, the reality of the messiness is showing in organizations that go bankrupt, for example,
I
or
agree.
staff end up suing their employer,
Oh,
whatever it is,
so
and people
many.
are just miserable going to
So
work.
many, so many. And it is just ironic, isn't it? Because it just feels so short-sighted. I don't know how your listeners will respond to this, but I'll be truthful about it. My least preferred word is professionalism because it just feels to me, it's like, okay, so put a smiley face on, darling. Neaten yourself up, put a smiley face on, just pretend it's not happening. Just get on, just get in line. And you just think the minute we start doing that, what are we denying? And if that's the stuff that manifests, it's only going to get harder.
And who's decided anyway that that is the definition of professional?
Exactly. Exactly.
You know
It's
what
like,
I mean? It's like professional to me is being able to show up as you are and handle it all. Sometimes knowing when you need support to handle it all, or not
yeah.
sometimes, but knowing when you need the support to handle it
Mm,
all,
mm,
knowing that you don't know everything,
mm.
and knowing that it's okay to sit in the unknowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, I've been doing a lot of work on burnout recently, Susan, and looking at that as an experience. And actually, the real risk with burnout is it's such a common experience, but it remains so hidden. It remains so untalked about. And it's another one of those that the minute it's behind the scenes, the minute it is hidden because people aren't allowed to be struggling at work, in inverted commas, don't feel like they are allowed to be struggling at work, it just escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates. And then we do get to the situation where it can't be hidden anymore. And then comes the shame, and then people go away. It feels to me that the problems come when we leave them too long, when we let things go. We can catch potential burnout if we can catch it really early on. Then actually what we can do is we can start to address it and we can start to do something with it. And it's much easier at that stage than when it's much more advanced. And so many of these things, if a person can say, I'm feeling really uncomfortable about this situation, or I need to have this difficult conversation, the sooner we can address those things, actually, the easier they are than if we leave it and leave it and leave it and leave it.
Yeah, and often it's our own thinking anyway that
Yeah,
causes the problem. We think
it's
it's going
always
to be
us,
a
Susan.
difficult conversation. It is always
It's
us, isn't
always me. Whatever happens in my house or my work, it's always just like, yeah, it was me. I did it. It's me.
it?
Always.
And I also think with burnout, having gone through it myself, that when you just don't know what's going on with you,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really hard to bring anyone else into that
Mm,
conversation as well.
mm,
And I think workplaces, and look, workplaces don't do anything, people do things, but
agree. Yeah.
people in workplaces will legislate by bringing in a policy, and whether that's like a maternity
Yeah.
policy or it's a
Yeah.
return to work policy or a
Yeah.
parental leave policy, and they
Yeah.
think that that's enough.
Mm,
And really, we don't need policies.
no.
You know not to murder your colleague, as one of my HR leaders used to always say, so you don't need to write it down. But so much of this stuff we inherently know as people. And when we do make checklists, then we outsource our humanity to that piece of paper.
Mm, mm, very much so. I know, back in the late noughties when lots of the work on authenticity and things like that was coming out, you go back to the core principles of that and the idea of knowing yourself and showing yourself. So knowing how you interact and knowing and then what you share, so how you show it. And there was definitely a sense that authenticity has a skill about it. So when to show that aspect of you. True principles of authenticity for me are very much about that, about me being able to be and bring all those things I've got about myself into any interaction, whether that's a workplace interaction, whether that's a parent-child interaction, whether that's a social interaction or not. And it feels to me there is huge fear in a lot of environments about people being able to be their true self. I have clients who, let's go back to the parental transition space, whether mothers or fathers adopted, people will hide their babies off screen. They'll pretend that the baby hasn't arrived or the child isn't there or the child hasn't existed. Or people will hide the fact that actually they're finding that return to work incredibly challenging because it's coincided with children starting school and they're all totally full of flu and they're embarrassed they've got to take time off. And what doesn't happen is they don't go, actually, but that person over there and that person over there and that person over there and that person over there is probably navigating exactly the same. And if we could actually talk to each other about it, maybe that's where we see properly, properly authentic, Susan's choking in the background, properly authentic conversations taking place. And it applies to burnout too. For every person burning out in one office, there will be a person in the office next door who is feeling very close to burnout themselves.
I think I got so excited.
Shall I keep talking while you choke?
No, no, no. I got so excited because you're like speaking my beliefs into being. And that I was watching recently, I think it's called in The Age of Disruption or something. It was a movie on Netflix and it's about somebody going to work in the White House and the world's about to end.
Yep.
And they have to lock their phones in a security room before they can go into the incident room where they're, saving the world. And when they know that the world's about to end, well, that's what it seems like. They break the rules and go and get their phones.
Yeah.
Because every single person has a family that they're thinking about. It shows this story from several different people's views. And what you see, or what I saw most in that, was people's humanity shining through in times of crisis. And everybody's going through something, like you've just said. And if we had that, I don't understand why we don't have that. Because when we're going through something ourselves, we'll forgive ourselves often, but we won't have the same compassion
Mm.
towards somebody else. We'll think they need to follow the rules, but it's okay for me to go to the dentist because my tooth is really aching or whatever. And there's so much about this right and wrong at work or rule keeping. It's very schooly.
Mm. Mm. Or sometimes I feel actually people are harder on themselves. I couldn't possibly go to the dentist. I had a lady who, as part of looking into burnout, who put off surgery because she just got a particular thing to do and then had to go and have a whole heap of emergency surgery. It's like, but actually you say to people, what would you suggest your friend does? And everyone's super clear about what they'd suggest somebody else does. Okay, so why can't we offer ourselves that same level of care? And I mean, I always come back to fear. And I open the book with talking about fear, which seems ironic when you're writing a book for brilliant women that are also going to become parents and they're working and all that different type of stuff. And it's like, okay, let's start with fear because, what stops people behaving in an incredibly natural, intuitive, authentic way is fear. And whether it's fear of being seen a particular way, fear of not being seen a particular way, whether it is fear of not belonging. Often fear of I'm going to be different if I do it this way, or I won't be conforming, fear of consequences. And you just think, actually, if we could accept that there is fear attached, and then if we could challenge our perception of that fear, how scary would that be, really? Or actually, how likely is that? How awful would it be? And ask ourselves those types of questions, then maybe I believe people have it in them. Most people instinctively know how to help somebody when they're struggling at work, or instinctively know when something doesn't feel right to them. because they'll come out of a meeting and think, God, that was awful. And it's likely to be the structure of the meeting as well. But that to one side, it's likely to be something behavioral that happened in that meeting. And people know this. So I think what's interesting is why we often feel like we have to swallow it down, or why we often feel like we have to turn away and look away. And it suggests to me that actually, because we're fearful of what would happen if we didn't do that.
Yeah, and there was an article in the New York Times maybe 2 years ago now, and it was interviewing kids in school. I think they were between 9 and 14, and their biggest fear was job loss, getting fired. They haven't even left school. They're like so small they barely know what jobs are.
Oh,
So we
yeah,
have this,
yeah.
yeah, this real fear of losing our jobs. And that's often the thing that people will say to me in a session is, I can't say that because I'll lose my job. In the UK, we live in a society where it's quite hard to lose your job, but we still have that fear.
Mm. And I think it's what the job represents. It won't invariably be the job itself, will it? It will be because the job represents, it forms part of my identity. Identity, I think, is so critical. And the way we link ourselves with our work is completely understandable, but it does become a huge part of who I am. I've supported people who have left professions which really have institutionalized them. Nurses, people who've worked in the NHS, people who work in education systems. And it's like, if I am not that, whatever that title is, then who am I? What am I? And women always told me, all parents, but particularly females about to give birth and become mothers would say, but if I then am suddenly a mother as well, then I'm not the work person that I was. And if I'm not that, then what will people think of me? And that sense of I can't possibly lose my job, I think is really interesting because we say if we can work out what the job represents, then actually we might get closer because status, income, or security, belonging, community, sense of worth, achieve parents' dreams, a sense of validation by people. They're actually usually the real things that mean that a person will hold on to a job that, if they break it down on paper, isn't one that they would have applied for if they were applying for it now, isn't making them happy, probably isn't worth it when they think about the effort they put in and the money they get out, but they will hold on to it like everything. Everything matters. And it's interesting that disconnect between their cognitive response, which is on paper, and the emotional response, which is, but I can't possibly. So I think that fear's really, really interesting to explore. And we all have that, hey? We all have that in us.
We do. And it's also just societally shared, isn't it? Because what you were saying there brought to mind a time. Now, I actually left every job I had without another job to go to.
Wow,
And I would just
that's
get to the stage
interesting.
where I would just go, that's it, I've had enough, I'm out of here. One of the last times I did it, I remember a friend of mine, her husband saying to her, well, Susan doesn't have any kids. If she had kids, she couldn't go and do
Ugh,
that.
no.
I know, but it's so interesting because that's the view that society takes. And I
Mm,
remember my parents not being happy that time, and everybody's kind of going, but you can't do that, and you need a
yeah,
job,
yeah,
blah, 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 blah.
yeah,
And we take notice of what
hugely,
people tell us
hugely.
rather than following what our desire is.
Hugely, hugely. I had a client recently tell me about a decision she was making to do with her work, which was to leave before she walked out or got fired. So to try to leave on good terms and do her good leaver, an environment that really, really isn't healthy for her, is causing her an inordinate amount of stress. She's very, very close to burnout. But her mother had said she was angry with her for making that choice. And it had paused everything in its tracks because mum being angry with her was far too significant for her choices, which she knew heart and head were correct for her, were going to be made. And so that will still play out, that situation. That's still playing out. And I think that sense of what are we trying to prove in any of these things? This was something that and for the record, I wasn't a person who was always like, I have to have children. I would have been, it was just I was blessed in my view with the two that I've got. Well, don't tell them that because sometimes I think I'm blessed with them. But actually, the judgment I found when I became a parent, oh my gosh, the stigmatism there was around me being a working parent. I chose to go back to work when my eldest son was 6 weeks old. And I had to because I'm self-employed and there are no maternity benefits. So, and also I wanted to, and I know I talk about this in the book, but the judgment that I received from some of the most surprising angles, and actually to the point that people would say to me, you will damage your child because you have done this. It was, Susan, it was astonishing. And I think if we translate that again into a broader context, it plays out. That lady saying, Mum was cross with me, angry with me for these decisions. And you just think this pressure to be something that other people expect or need you to be for them, their needs, not yours, versus what is your head and your heart and your heart are actually telling you yourself. So what's your whole being telling you? Because you will instinctively know, and that is going to feel right. Then once we've got that, the question becomes, okay, so how do we develop the skills so that we can articulate it? How do we find the courage so that then we can use those words that we found? Because usually when you put stuff out there, it's not as bad as we think it's going to be either. And the people who thought that I was making the worst decisions ever, they don't matter as much to me. I thought they did, but they don't.
And also, it wasn't about you anyway. It's always about the other person, isn't it? I know, remember when my sister was pregnant, I do think people think for some reason, society feels it can offer more advice to pregnant women or
Oh,
go
yeah.
around and touch their bellies or whatever, and to when they enter the workforce than any other situation. I mean, I find
Everyone's
it
got a
quite
view.
astounding.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And I wanted certainly in the writing that I've done about it, Susan, to say there is no right way in this. It is only about you finding your way because medical professionals, health professionals, other parents, anyone will have their view and they will be very, very, very free to offer it. And that is an overwhelming amount of information that comes to people. And the messages in the book are written to say, okay, so let's shut out all of that noise. Let's connect you to your sense of self, and then you will find your right way. So important. And again, I think if we can translate those principles out into other life and work environments, shut the noise, pause the noise, connect a sense of self, and then you will know. And then you set about finding out how you make that happen or how you communicate it.
And it is simple, isn't it? It's not necessarily easy, but it is quite a simple divining mechanism that's
Mm,
there to tune into. And I think that really comes across powerfully in your book. You keep bringing that message back that it's
good.
about your way. You're the one,
Great.
it's your way. And that so resonates
Oh,
as
I'm
well.
glad you heard that because that's important, I feel.
And I also think you've written it in such a conversational. I mean, I don't know how you achieved it actually, because it is so nicely articulated, so
Thank you,
much of
Susan.
yourself in it in a way that it's relevant to anyone, like I've said. It's definitely has to be relevant to parents, I'd say, at any stage of working as a parent and our mothers in particular. And I won't say you're like a big sister or someone holding my hand because it's not I don't want to underplay it either, but there's a
Mm,
very wise, thoughtful guide. Perhaps
thank
that's what
you.
it is. You're
Thank
very,
you.
and that comes across beautifully. And I don't think anyone would ever feel they were being lectured to, given advice as
No,
such.
don't need advice. Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we're going in this direction. These are the things to consider. How are you now?
Yeah, yeah. And I am such a huge advocate for all of us being well supported. You know, that scaffolding around a person, that bench of supporters. I talk about it a lot. I talk about it in all different work contexts, including in the book. And that sense that actually everything is better if we're not doing it alone. And it doesn't mean we're constantly having to be needy for things, but knowing people are there if or as or when we need some help seeing something that we can't see ourselves, or we need some tips about what another person might have done, or we just need some help finding a word, or acknowledging, or sitting with that icky feeling and saying, this doesn't feel very nice right now, does it? And somebody being with you as that happens. We're pack animals, hey, but so often it feels like we navigate very difficult situations in isolation, and that piece doesn't make sense to me.
And that probably comes back to a fear of feeling worthy to involve other people or something as well. So we're back to, we circle around fear. Rachel, I think we could talk all day. I know we could, actually.
Well, we can do. We can keep this one going, Susan, afterwards.
Absolutely. But if someone would like to know more, to read your book,
Yeah.
to work with you, Rachel,
Yeah.
what are the ways to connect with you?
So connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's Rachel Morris on LinkedIn is a great way of finding out more about who I am, how I speak about things, the views I have, the work I do. If you check out www.motionlearning.com, then you've got all our podcast information of our own. You've got articles that we've written. You can find out more about the different types of work that we do there. So I would say they are the two starting places. And on everything, you will find my telephone number is there and my email is there. And I say to people, I genuinely don't put them there for fun. It's like, reach out. So I can't say I need to work with people who support me if I can't be there for other people as well. So I think it's, yeah, please reach out, ask questions, get involved in the conversation. It's all a dialogue.
And your book, widely available?
And the book is, yeah, I forget about the book. Don't forget about the book, Rachel. The book, thank you, Susan. Working Mother is widely available. So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it in all your well-known bookstores as well. So Working Mother by Rachel Morris. That's where to get that book.
Brilliant. Rachel, it's been a pleasure. We went all over the place today.
I loved that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for the invite.
What stayed with me from this conversation with Rachel is how much of what we struggle with at work is simply part of being human. It's this universal human experience. Rachel spoke about fear, identity, transition, or the in-between space where what we knew is gone and what's coming is yet to arrive. That neutral zone that many of us try to move past quickly or ignore or hide. The messiness of the human experience. When we tune in and get curious about what's really happening without the need to fix it and have the courage to stay with this discomfort, recognizing that this is a universal human experience, we can stop feeling alone or tackling it alone. And then that opens up the possibility for more honest, human communication and conversations at work. Thank you for listening to Life Beyond the Numbers. If someone popped into your mind while you were listening, maybe a friend or a colleague, send them the episode. Chances are they'll appreciate it too. And if it spoke to you, a few kind words in a review can help others like us find it too.